And with that, let's get started. Today's webinar is titled Making Your Home Work for You, Design Strategies for Aging in Place. Our presenter is Heidi Schlegel, an alumna from the class of 2007, an assistant professor of interior design at RIT and owner of HT Designs Environmentally Responsible Interiors, a residential and commercial design build firm in Rochester, New York. Heidi holds a BFA in interior design from RIT and an MS in architecture with a specialty in interior design. Heidi has over 25 years experience in the field of interior design with a focus on sustainable design and building practices, including universal design strategies and occupant health. Heidi currently serves as an assistant professor at RIT. For the past 10 years, her scholarly and academic works have focused on the standardization of sustainable practices within the home building industry, promoting sustainability and universal design as standard practices in order to support healthy, enriching, and functional environments. Heidi, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Lydia. That was very kind. Hello, everybody. I hope we'll be able to get through today and learn a little something that you can use for your future housing needs. We're going to look today at some of the things that we need to do in our built environment to make our homes more functional for us. I'm really excited to be able to speak about aging in place and how we can stop having an adversarial relationship within our built environments. Create homes that work for us rather than against us, whether we're caring for an aging family, aging in place ourselves, or having a disability of any sort, whether temporary or permanent. I think this is the essence of the problem, that our current housing stocks cause us to live in an adversarial relationship with our homes. The way our current housing system is based is on a millennia-old model of spaces that are designed for the average able-bodied person. I haven't yet met that person. Average doesn't really exist when it comes to the complexities of the human condition. We didn't think much about designing to accommodate the aging or impaired, as for the most part, the aged and infirmed were a minority in our population. At the turn of the 20th century, only 4% of the population was over the age of 65. The average lifespan was just over 47.3 years, which, if you think about today, where almost 15% of the population is over 65 and living to an average lifespan of 78.8 years, we've made some great strides forward with our longevity, thankfully. This demographic is projected to grow exponentially, accounting for almost 20% of the population by 2050. We are clearly an aging population. And as many people say today, 70 is the new 40. I like to think so because that makes me younger than I am. But the reality is the statistics do prove that we are having more vigorous lifestyles for longer periods of time.
And Heidi, I'd just like to take a moment to point out to everyone on the webinar that there is a polling question up asking about your experience and your interest in attending today's webinar. So please go ahead and complete that.
So with a rapidly aging population, it's time for our homes to really serve us better in our needs as we do develop impairment, or again, we're talking about minor impairments as well. The 2000 census showed that approximately 20.9 million American families had at least one family member with a disability. The prevalence of disabled persons living in standardized housing, which does not cater to the needs of the people, can have adverse effects from increased incidence of injury due to forced navigation of barriers, to diminished independence, increased medical care costs, and the inability to engage socially within the community due to limited transportation or accessibility of homes. The reality is that disabilities affect everyone. At some point, most people experience a limitation of mobility, whether from accident, injury, or illness. Those with temporary injury, and I will include pregnant women in this category. Everybody who's had that experience knows that we don't function the same anymore. A broken leg, this all affects our experience in the built environment. So whether or not not a disability affects a family directly, visitability of homes by the disabled must also be considered. Can you have somebody of diminished capacity come visit and function appropriately within your space? So the reality is that most homes, most standardized homes, do not allow for that, and people are required to have some sort of assistance if they have a disability within average houses. So research has shown that barriers within the living environment are exacerbating the disablement of inhabitants. Freedom of movement, functionality, and safety are impeded. This is argued as speeding the transition to of the aged to residential care facilities. As we think about social isolation, because people can't move about freely, loneliness, all of this impairs health, happiness, and self-esteem, and will result in forced early transition to long-term residential facilities for care. And that is usually not everybody's ideal situation. A 2008 study on the housing industry cited that 90% of the current housing stocks in the U.S. are inaccessible to people with disabilities. So if we do the math, we have a large population of displaced individuals who are unable to connect with safe and functional living. So our goal today is to begin a dialogue of how we can meet the needs of our aging population with the tools we have at hand. How can we address this in our current situations and housing stocks? So let's begin by defining aging in place. The U.S. CDC has defined aging in place as the ability to live in one's own home and community safely, independently, and comfortably, regardless of age, income, or ability level. So if we take this a little bit farther, the goal for design for aging in place is to create a place to live that is physically manageable, emotionally uplifting, and is connected with independence, peace of mind, and self-improvement. Now, the AARP has studied the needs of the aging population and determined that more than 8 in 10 individuals over the age of 45 and more than 9 in 10 of those over the age of 65 would prefer to age in place, remaining outside of the resident healthcare system. 82% of those people would prefer to stay in their current living environments. So if we look at the factors, some of the considerations that we have to look at, there are many factors that we have to evaluate when we're determining the practicality of aging in place. First of all, it's important to make decisions early and have family involved and informed with your choices. It's much more difficult to make the decision of housing and how that housing is going to be accommodated once more impeding physical issues arise. And the reality is you are never too young to start planning. Whether you're planning for the care of an aging family member or you're planning for your own purposes, even 20, 30 years out, again, you're never too early. Once disability hits, oftentimes, decisions have to be made too quickly, and they may not be the right decisions at that point.
And Heidi, again, we'll just note that there is a second polling question up here. We'd like to get people's views on what they think are the biggest challenges to staying in your own home.
So some of the considerations we have to look at, first of all, finances. I think that's probably everybody's primary consideration when they look at long-term living and they look at some of the healthcare systems and the resident programs. We all know how expensive they can be. Staying at home does not necessarily mean you are going to be saving very large amounts of money. So the first step is to consult with your financial professionals. We can't answer those questions. Those are things that are very personal to each and every one of you. The reality is that staying at home and aging in place may require additional costs for care workers, visitors, care visitors, aides, or additional service that you may need for your personal care. Continued home maintenance and upkeep also is a continued expense. If you think about how much it costs for you to live currently, it may change quite a bit. If you traditionally maintained your home independently before, you may not be able to maintain that particular level of engagement. It may be more difficult for you to mow the lawn or shovel the driveway or whatever it happens to be. There's also the consideration of cost for the potential required renovations in order to make your home serviceable, or even relocation to a space that is more appropriate for aging in place needs. So those are some basic financial considerations. Your health is also a concern, and again, you should consult with a healthcare provider before taking these steps. There are points in time when safety should be the foremost consideration. It's not always practical to consider independent living where there may be severe physical or cognitive deficits unless there's a really strong full-time care system within the home, a family member, a caregiver. When we're dealing with severe degenerative diseases, this may dictate that at some point a holistic care environment is more appropriate. Your level of mobility is also a consideration. How can you function? Do you have the ability to live and work independently? And if you do not, again, that is going to increase the need for support and care within the home. What available transportation is there? At some point, we all will lose the ability to drive or move ourselves. So will there be some access to transportation? Now, many communities have elder care busing systems. We've also seen the increase in ride-sharing programs around the country, such as Uber. This has really changed the face of transportation in many communities, easing the burden for those that cannot drive and making it, I guess, easier and more rapid to make the choice to give up the keys when it's necessary.
Heidi, we have a question coming in. It says, in dealing with insurance agencies, they always talk about ADLs. Is that something you should be looking at to assess your ability to stay in your home?
I'm not quite familiar with the term ADL. Would you clarify that?
It is activity of daily living.
Oh, yes. So is that a consideration? Yes. If you are thinking about what is it you have to do every day, how much independence do you have in order to function within the space? Again, this feeds back to mobility, health, and finances. The idea of, you know, if you need extra help, is insurance going to be covering it? And many times it does not. So will you have further support? And that all depends, again, upon your personal financial situation. Okay, so when we think about marital status or partnership, this is where we talk about social support systems. Will you have a regular support system within the house? Is your partner supportive of the idea of aging in place? If you are talking about this for elder care, that requires the entire family to be cohesive in the decision as well. The burden cannot be placed on a single person within the home. It has to be a collaborative effort. So it has to be an agreement by all parties that you have some sort of support system. If there's conflict, this can cause social and relationship problems within the home, which can add to greater disability and difficulty for the entire household. Social needs are extraordinarily important. The reality is feeling socially isolated is as great a risk to health as cigarette smoking. So will you have access to social and community components in an aging in place situation? Can you go to work? Can you transport yourself to church or volunteer clubs or classes or shopping, whatever it happens to be, places where you can go and be with friends. So social component and how that is going to feed into the living situation is really important to evaluate. If there's going to be too much isolation, again, then it becomes an unhealthy environment. And that's where you can say, well, maybe a long-term care situation is more appropriate because then it's almost a forced socialization component. So all your decisions should be fluid and flexible. Reality is life happens, things change. The more willing you are to shift with the ebbs and flows of life, the less conflict it creates in your living environment. So it's recommended, again, I can't enforce this enough, is that you consult with your financial and medical professionals before making the commitment to elder care or aging in place. So there are a lot of factors to consider when deciding to age in place, and many more than we can discuss in a 1-hour webinar. But today we're going to focus on the basic elements to make the design of your existing space or your future home work for you in the most ideal way. So let's take a look at the age-related barriers that we have to design for in the built environment, and we're going to address them as we discuss some design solutions as we move forward. So typical age-related barriers. Well, first, diminished balance and mobility. I think that's pretty commonly understood. The increased threat of fall and or injury. And again, our physical environment can really increase the incidence or the threat of increased fall and injury. Lowered aerobic capacity or stamina. This is less ability to stand for long periods of time or walk distances. Loss of physical strength, lifting, manipulation of doors, objects, commonly done in everyday life. Changes in hearing and hearing loss and decreased visual perception and acuity. Now, both of these have an obvious impact to our sensory perceptions, but it also can result in diminished balance and difficulty of navigating spaces. So we're going to look at a couple of cues that we could do to help improve upon that. So slowed reaction time and tactile sensitivity, which can result in greater injuries such as cooktop burns and hot water scalding. We don't have the reaction time as we age. You know, even by the age of 50, our reaction time has slowed. So we need to treat these responses much as we would for young children who also have slowed reaction times. Cognitive decline, memory, language, thinking and judgment, informational processing, these will all eventually diminish as we age. We don't have to have some degenerative condition such as Alzheimer's to have that occur. It happens just through the actual process of life. So let's look at some tools that we can utilize to make our living environments more functional for us as we age. These cues should serve to assist you with evaluating the conditions of your current home, whether or not it is truly adaptable to future needs or for you or your family members. Some adaptations will be more extreme than others, but I think most of them are fairly approachable. So key locations to review in the household. The first one is accessible routes. How do we gain entry to the building? Now this also includes site access. So if we have steps into the building, if we have a curb up to the sidewalk, we have to think about how those transitions are being navigated. Doors and interior circulation routes, are they accessible? Can you navigate through a space with a mobility device, such as a walker, scooter, or wheelchair? Bathrooms and kitchens. Now, these are extremely important areas to evaluate as they serve the highest hazard and may be the largest monetary investment for adaptation. These also have the highest payback in home resale, so there may be a balance there depending upon the market. And again, as you consider these spaces and putting money into these spaces, it is always worthwhile to consult with a real estate professional to see whether the investment is viable for you. Comfort and controls, electrical systems, lighting, and acoustic quality. We have to provide comfort or convenient and useful access to power, avoiding trip hazards with cords. Because of visual impairment issues, we're going to have increased lighting, and tactile interaction with lighting has to be functional and easy. So switching, such as touch sensors, do assist with that. We're going to talk a little bit about acoustic control within the space to assist with hearing deficits. Acoustics can be very impacting to people with hearing decline. If we have too much echo, it can be very problematic. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment. This is where we're going to have to think about control location on equipment. Is the user interface convenient? Does the stove controls, are they toward the user instead of having to reach across the stove top? Is the user interface convenient and understandable if maybe your processing starts to slow down? Too much complexity can cause confusion and frustration and cause injury. So also the ability to secure the controls to lock out access to equipment if required, HVAC, refrigeration, and other things. So ease of use for furniture, for instance, easily movable chairs to slide away from the table. I always like to use Olive Garden as a favorite suggestive for this. Olive Garden has always been a restaurant that has wheels on their chairs for when we eat too much pasta. But it also aids people from getting up if they're elderly, because simply the act of pushing the chair away from the table can become very difficult. So easily movable chairs, stable furniture, and stable furniture especially because oftentimes the elderly will utilize those pieces for support, whether to get up from the table or as they're walking down the hall to have that moment of balance. So, you know, some basic things that we're going to look at. Now, there are several different levels of performance for aging in place environments. We're going to look at the base level, and then we are going to look at some features of the highest level of performance, which is known as universal design. Now, the minimum standard of performance for an aging in place situation is what we term visitability. So it's a fun word to say fast. Visitability is defined as allowing basic access to one infirmed in a wheelchair. Now, this doesn't refer to full functionality. Rather, it's the ability to provide the most basic movement and function for somebody who lives or visits a home. The standard for visitability, again, assumes a wheelchair access. So can they enter a building? Egress, the ability to get in and out of a building. Can they enter a building unaided? Now, this usually will refer to a roll-in entrance. That is the ideal, but not many homes have that. So we're going to break this down and talk about each of these features as we go along. Can they pass through interior doorways? Are the corridors wide enough for people to circulate? Can they use a toilet? Transfer from the chair to the water closet unaided? Can they access a sleeping area? So all these features of single floor living will make it a lot easier for people to sustain. All right, so let's look at the first factor, which is egress and interior circulation. Now, egress requires at least one zero-step entrance. Again, getting into the building and getting out of the building, at least one zero-step entrance on an accessible route leading from a driveway or a public sidewalk. Now, often this roll-in entrance is located in the garage to protect from weather and snow buildup. Not just for wheelchairs. If we think about people as they age, they often shuffle their feet instead of lift their feet cleanly. Knee issues can be problematic and balance issues as well. So as we try to navigate even one or two small steps, it can be a great risk for injury. So how do we deal with it when most homes have steps into them? In order to retrofit existing houses with a roll-in, ramps are really going to be required. Now, we've all seen the buildings that have been retrofitted with ramps sitting in the front yard. Oftentimes, it's a real eyesore, an unwanted signal that someone with an impairment lives there, and it actually can attract crime. The other opportunities are to put them into garages, and that is done quite frequently, but of course you do lose the storage potential for your garage. So there's a few different ways to do it, but they have to be placed in areas where it is readily accessible and it can easily come in and out. They can't enter into a home in, let's say, a laundry room where it's too narrow for the wheelchair to navigate through. So thinking about what it enters into in the home is important as well. So ramps, even in a commercial environment, are not always functionally applied. ADA requires ramp systems into most commercial entities, well, I would say all, but only most are accommodating of that. And the way ADA states it is that a maximum slope of 1 to 12, that means 1 foot of rise per 12 foot of run, is required as the shortest opportunity for a ramp. This is the minimum length that you can get. So for 1 foot of rise, you're going to have 12 linear feet of ramp. Now, that's a really cumbersome and steep slope for people to navigate with limited mobility. I actually, every year, have my students endeavor an experience where they do navigate through many ADA situations in a wheelchair. Now, we're talking very vibrant 20-year-olds. And on campus, we do have a 1 to 12 ramp. And they have all agreed that going down a 1 to 12 ramp, sometimes you do catch some speed on it. And going back up, you do have to have some physical strength in order to push the wheelchair up. So they were finding it very difficult. Now, the ideal slope for a ramp is the other end of the spectrum, and that's where we have 1 foot of rise for 20 feet of run. Now, if you figure that your average step into the home is between 16 and 24 inches, that means a ramp may be as long as 24 to 40 feet or more. So this is why it really is important to evaluate your space and see how are you going to accommodate these early so that as you go through the process of renovation, you can maybe make accommodation, whether you're recontouring your property or maybe looking at homes that are more accommodating.
And Heidi will point out that we do have another poll question up if people would like to think a little bit about your own home and let us know how accessible you think your space is.
I'm noticing that 63% currently do not believe their home is, which is realistic. I mean, it's very realistic. But again, that doesn't mean that it can't be made to accommodate. Some homes are going to be much more difficult, especially when we're dealing with tighter, more vertically challenged homes, many floors and very small spaces, older city homes and so forth. So looking at, again, other ideas for egress interior circulation, open floor plans are ideal. Widened halls, the wider the hall, the easier we're going to have for transport through the space. Interior passage through doorways is a really big conundrum for many homes. The average home has probably about a 32-inch door. Now, on the slide, you're going to see that 32-inch clear passage is the ideal for a wheelchair. Now, that means clear. That means the doorknob's not impeding, the stops are not impeding. That requires a minimum of a 34-inch door leaf. Now, we do see those in many situations, but oftentimes we can have as small as a 24-inch door within a residential setting. So retrofitting doors is probable in those situations, and it's not a big infraction to retrofit a door into space as long as you have the wall space to accommodate it. The ideal door width is a 36-inch door width, which is a traditional primary entry door from the outside that is considered an egress door. So looking at those passages, they do have wheelchairs that are narrower for passing through smaller residential doors, but those will not necessarily accommodate people who maybe are bariatric, suffer from obesity, or motorized wheelchairs either. So the functionality of the door has to be thought about as well. All doors within the building should have lever rather than knobs for graspability. It's kind of nice that these have become standardized in the industry. It's allowing the function with a closed fist. It's sort of the standard for considering any sort of hand-manipulated object. Can it be functioned with a closed fist? Everybody's experienced carrying things, carrying babies. I go back to pregnancy as a disability. You could open it with your elbow. So little things like that do matter. And again, utilizing keyless locking systems are the best option. Strength and hand coordination is really required to manipulate a key, and again, even with minor levels of arthritis, that can be a severe impairment. Single floor living requires a room that can accommodate sleeping quarters on the first floor and a bathroom on the main floor that accommodates a toilet area, a shower, ideally a roll-in shower. There are products on the market today that do allow showers to be retrofitted as curbless and roll-in without adjusting or having to deal with the structure underneath the shower. So there's some wonderful products out there that can make retrofitting that very easy. If there is a curb, it should be an extremely low curb because the act of stepping in the shower can be a very dangerous point of transition. And it's important to have some sort of seating in there. So when you think about those transitions, grab bars for support are extraordinarily important, both vertical and horizontal bars. And ADA guidelines that are easily found online through the Department of Justice website, it's a PDF that you can download, will clearly designate the ideal height and location of grab bars. Now, it's important that you actually do purchase grab bars that are intended as grab bars and not towel racks, which so many people do revert to using. They are not structurally sound enough, and when you are doing an installation of a grab bar, it's very important that you understand that it has to go into the structure itself. It has to go into the wood studs in the walls. If you are designing a house or looking for homes, having blocking within the walls, horizontal wood blocking between the studs does give greater surface area for the attachment of the grab bars. There have been many injuries caused by people pulling themselves up and supporting themselves with grab bars that were just installed to the tile and the gypsum board, and it is just not stable enough to support any sort of weight. So be very careful of that. Make sure that whoever is installing these enhancements is qualified and understands the needs of the material. Yes.
We just want to point out that we have, I think, our last polling question up. If people want to take a look at that, and I want to interject just one thing, because in preparation for this, Heidi and I had an interesting conversation about the changes in the aesthetic of many of the aid pieces that you find on the market now, so that it doesn't necessarily look like you have created a bedroom or a bathroom that was designed for someone who was disabled. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that was always the torture. You know, when we, even 10 years ago, when we were looking at putting enhancements for, you know, elder care, aging in place, or again, just minor disabilities, you ended up with this institutional-looking hospital that really made, first of all, it was a detriment to your housing value. People lost money for having, you know, these elements in there. And so it wasn't until the marketplace grew. And why did the marketplace grow? Well, the marketplace grew because now the aging population is the largest demographic, and there's money to be made on it. So we had a lot of famous designers like Michael Graves, who became wheelchair-bound as well. And so they all looked at how do we start to incorporate these things so that they do become standardized and they do become part of everybody's dialogue in an attractive manner. And I think that's probably why towel bars started to be used so much inappropriately. That now we have amazing, attractive designs that become invisible, become part of the intent. And I think that's the ideal, is when you're retrofitting your home for aging in place, it shouldn't be these demarcations around your home of disability. That's, you know, why I kind of dislike the idea of having to put ramps in homes. We can design homes with roll-in entrances. So the idea is that it should be invisible. And this is a huge dialogue within the interior design and architecture industries and the industrial design industries. It's how do we start to create more and more? And there is a lot available. It does take a little bit of investigation, but we're seeing it come into play even at home stores like Home Depot and Lowe's. And that's when the shift has been made, so that we can make it attractive. I recall years ago looking at homes, and whenever you looked at a home that an older person had been in, you just looked at it and thought, oh, all this stuff I have to fix and turn back. It's like when you have kids and you have to put baby gates up everywhere. We don't want to do that. We want it to be invisible and integrated. And actually, as we move forward into our next slide, we'll talk about those integrated qualities. So again, think about grab bars and how we put those in, and beware of towel racks and locations that are easily grasped. The availability of laundry facilities is important as well. You know, again, we have to be able to function within the environment, and oftentimes these are a little more narrowed. If we have a top feed machine, that may be a little bit more difficult because, again, we're lifting up out. Think maybe about front-loading machines that are raised up on a base so that there is a direct interaction with it, and we don't have those physical impediments. So this is the basic consideration for visitability, and you can see it's fairly common elements that I'm sure you're fairly familiar with. But you know, the reality is the cost of these additions aren't all that expensive. You know, bathrooms and things like that may be a little bit more, but again, there might be that invested value. So, you know, oftentimes it is primary that we consider this during the construction, and this is why I've been pushing to see the home building industry really change how they do things, because if we had things as simple as a roll-in entrance and a roll-in shower integrated from the beginning, the costs are absolutely negligible, and they do become a little more difficult to add after the fact. So let's look at the features of the higher standard of functional interiors. And this is something termed universal design. It's also known as barrier-free design. And this is sort of the complete other end of the spectrum. And as we talk about, you know, the idea of designing for elder care and disability, universal design is designing for everybody, whether you're 2 or you're 90. Whether you have strength or no strength, whether you have whatever impairment it can be. And this is really where the design industry is heading overall, is the idea of making spaces that ignore that average person, because the average person doesn't exist, but designing for every person. And it's quite a large, arduous task. So this is the highest level of accommodation, and again, adding any of the elements that we're going to talk about, and we're just going to touch upon it because, again, we only have so much capacity here. Adding any of these elements to your space will improve its functionality. So let's define universal design. Ron Mace was the originator of the term and the concept of universal design, and actually, if you see on the slide, the Center for Universal Design link is on the bottom of the page. I do suggest you go take a look at it. They are really the people who started this movement and still sit at the cutting edge of universal design standards. So Ron Mace, the originator of the term, defines universal design as the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation and specialized design. And again, this is the goal. We shouldn't have to retrofit. We shouldn't have to shift our homes. So as a sustainable designer, universal design is a major part of that dialogue, because the sustainability denotes that we don't have to make retrofits for one person who is a period of time of disability and then rip those out and throw that all away for the next person that comes through. We want to have it adaptable for everybody. So let's look at some of the key universal design ideals for spatial and product design. And again, all of these factors, in order to be truly universal, really have to be met. So equitable use is the first one. Now, equitable use means that the product or design is useful to people with diverse abilities. Again, whether you're 2 or you're 92. You should be able to use the product. Flexibility in use accommodates a wide range of individual preferences and abilities. Simple and intuitive products. Now, products should be easy to understand regardless of users' experience, knowledge, language skills, or current concentration level. My elderly mother-in-law just purchased a car. Well, I shouldn't call her elderly. She's young and vibrant. She's 78 years old, and she just purchased a car, a new Subaru, and has had to spend the last 2 evenings with the salespeople at the Subaru dealership to work through the controls.
Oh my God. Put me in line for that. I still can't figure mine out.
Well, because they're so complex. You know, there's all these, there's no intuitive quality to it. And you know, I've been a car person for years, and I even looked at it and I thought, well, this really isn't intuitive. This requires a learning curve. And that's where we get away and we lose the idea of universal design. If intelligent human beings cannot consider it on an easy glance, then there's a problem. So again, it should be easy to understand. Perceptible information. This is where the design will communicate the necessary information effectively to the user regardless of ambient conditions or the user's sensory abilities. So again, same thing, similar to the intuitive product. Tolerance for error means that the design minimizes hazards and the adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions. If you use it incorrectly, is there going to be a detrimental impact to that? So we should allow for those errors. Low physical effort, the design can be used efficiently and comfortably with a minimum of fatigue. And of course, size and space. Appropriate size and space is provided for approach, reach, manipulation, and the use regardless of the user's body size, posture, or mobility. Now, the topic of universal design is a large one, and it is far too complex to be fully expressed within the confines of this webinar, but I'd like to focus on a few key design features that can easily be assessed and integrated into most living environments with minimal expense, existing or new. So we're going to relate these to the specific concerns of aging as we move along.
I just have one question. Every person in the world should read The Design of Everyday Things by Donald Norman.
I would agree with that. I would absolutely agree with that. You know, I think that we have a very large portion of the industry that arrogantly, to some degree, designs for specific demographics. And, you know, as I said earlier, where are those people? I've never found anybody that fits into these stereotypes that they feel we should. So, you know, we're so limited. My mother-in-law, other side, had a severe rheumatoid arthritis, and she couldn't manipulate buttons. Yet all the fashionable clothing had buttons. You know, so we had to start looking at, you know, clothing that had zippers but then even those were difficult. So, you know, how are we designing? There was a product line that came out years ago of clothing that had Velcro closures for people with hand manipulation issues, but they looked like they had Velcro closures. I don't think anybody really wanted to be there. So you know, again, how do we think beyond? And I think this is where the dialogue of universal design has really steamrolled across the design community, and it is taking a really fast-paced move forward. So I think we're going to see a lot of changes in the design of everything as we move along. All right, so let's look at, again, some of our basic keys. So for balance and mobility, one of our standard age-related barriers, we've already talked about grab bars, again, vertical and horizontal bars, but think beyond just the shower area, shower and water closet area, bath areas. You may need something along circulation routes, along accessible routes, again, to stabilize. If there is any sort of step hazard, a low curb, you know, curbless showers, flooring transitions from one material to the next, that really should be associated with a grab bar as well. So think beyond. Maybe beside the bed it might be appropriate to have something. So how can it be incorporated, or even on the bed itself, how can it be incorporated into a positive aesthetic? When we think about step hazards, flooring transitions and area rugs are a complete hazard. Most area rugs are responsible for tripping up even the most able-bodied of people. So although we may love the hardwood floor look with the area rugs on it, there does come a point in time where it's time to roll them up and put them away, or move them outside of the primary circulation zone. It's not worth risking you know, injury. If they must remain in place, again, make sure that they're secured, they're taped, but I'm not a fan of you know, relying upon that. Phones and communication devices should be placed in areas where there is a higher hazard. So if we think about bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchens, walkways, including some sort of communication device. Now, we're all addicted to cell phones, and we've seen an elimination of the house phone in many environments, and that's great, but how often does that cell phone get left in one location? So still incorporating some sort of communication device is important. If it's not a hardline phone, then thinking about maybe some of the emergency communications we have from medical alerts that can be worn, but of course they must be worn. Or there are also devices now where you can actually just call out, you can yell out, and they can perceive your voice and call for help. So alarm companies can accommodate those, but we can't forget about them, you know, just because we've started eliminating phones, hardwire phones from our homes. Incorporating turning radius is sort of a challenge for many people. So unless you have an open floor plan, it can be difficult, but when we think about a wheelchair, having a 5-foot turning radius, a 60-inch turning radius, in order to pivot the chair is important. So furniture may have to be moved out of the way, or again, this may determine that a space isn't ideal for adaptation. Reduced stamina, lowered aerobic capacity, including elements that will give pause is important. So standing for long periods in the kitchen or bathroom, provide a chair or a stool in those areas, and again, a chair or a stool with arms is very important, something stable, because it will be used to balance. Having seated height work surfaces in the kitchen and the bathroom as well is very important. Now, make sure that you include functional aspects such as the mirror. So if you're seated in the bathroom, is the sink of an appropriate height for you to be able to manipulate yourself? And is the mirror lowered so that you can see as well? So frequent seating opportunities in circulation paths, moments to stabilize yourself in circulation zones such as handrails, and again, stabilized furniture is important. Physical strength. Now again, this is something people start to see very early on, is the difficulty of standing from a seated position. So again, the importance of seats with arms, and again, stable enough arms in order to lift yourself from a seated position. Even overly cushioned furniture can be very difficult to get up from. So evaluating the furniture for ease of use in that situation is important when we sink too deeply into a couch. Now, 17 to 19 inches is the standard seat height. They usually say 18 inches. Now, that's your standard dining chair height. Those are the ideal heights for people with any sort of physical strength condition or even knee condition. So this is also going to include water closets, and I guess that's something most people don't think about too easily. A standard water closet, a standard toilet, is about 15 inches high, and that's actually very low for anybody who does have any sort of knee or strength disability. It is very difficult to get up from, and I have to say I have rescued several older people from water closets as they have gotten stuck. So it's something to consider. Now, in the marketplace today, this has become very common. In the marketplace today, these are referred to either as ADA compliant or comfort height toilets, the raised toilets that have the 17 to 19-inch seat height. So they are available. Most manufacturers have them. They look no different than a standard water closet. And I have to say that even for younger people, they do become more comfortable. So this is a very easy and inexpensive adaptation to make to have your space more user-friendly. So look for that term comfort height. 2 to 4 inches, it's surprising how much of a difference that makes in the ability to rise up. So when we think about reach, that's the other issue. Most kitchens have an abundance of overhead cabinets, face-level cabinets that we always put our heavy things in, like our dishes and other elements like that. We're going to want to make sure that we have a 4-foot maximum reach for storage. Now, this includes closets, kitchens, anywhere we have drawers. And the one thing I do suggest is utilizing drawer systems under the countertop. The traditional cabinets where we open the 2 doors, that requires you to pretty much get down on the floor to get into. They're not practical. Manufacturers develop the ones where you open the doors and you pull out the shelf. That's a little bit better, but again, that requires 2 acts. But the drawers, they sometimes call them pot drawers. They can hold up to 100 pounds. I have to say in my own kitchen, I designed my kitchen with very few upper cabinets. I think I have 3 of them in a very large kitchen, and all of my lower cabinets are drawer units, and I store everything in them, including my dishware. So it's much easier to lift up from below than it is to have something come overhead and come down. So it does become a safety issue. Even our dishwashers are available in drawer units today, so much easier to manipulate. Again, when we're thinking about physical strength and mobility, we also have to look at specific concerns for wheelchairs or seated transport, such as motor scooters. This requires a 30-inch high work surface, which is your average table. If there is a table in the environment, maybe a table in the middle of the room, that can serve as a work surface. It does require 27 inches is the ADA number that they say for underneath, for your knees to come in. And if you look at the images, the insets underneath the sink and the stove allow a wheelchair approach right up to it. So there are opportunities in our product lines for kitchens and cabinetry to accommodate these, and they also can be retrofit. Now, the one that you see on the right with the sink opened to below, we have cabinet doors, which allows that sink to look as if it is a standard cabinet unit. And actually, shelves can be installed in there for use when there is no need for, before impairment happens, when there is no need for a wheelchair access. It can be a standard cupboard with shelves. When impairment occurs and wheelchair has to happen, simply remove the shelves and the wheelchair can roll right under. So this is a universal design consideration that we're starting to see come into the industry and can very easily be built without too much expense. So it does accommodate the varied stages in life. Hearing and visual loss, changes in hearing loss, we should integrate visual enhancement lights for audible elements such as smoke detectors, include a strobe. Doorbells and phones can also have light enhancement, light alerts with them. When we talk about our transitions, we talked a lot about hard surfaces, the idea that people shuffle and soft surfaces can be trip hazards. A lot of hard surfaces can also increase the acoustic reflection within a space, cause acoustic noise and reverberation. And again, this can cause serious issues with the ability to define specific sounds. Hearing aids can make this experience worse as they cannot always define noise from speech. So integrating acoustically absorbing elements into the space to allow sound to be clearly heard at a high volume. Soft surfaces, low pile carpeting, again, something wheelchair rollable. They consider that about an 1/8 inch, so it's a very, like a Berber, a very low pile carpet. Drapery, upholstered furnishings, all these things will allow some absorption. And if there is an echo within the space, you should stop and pause and think about how to diminish that so that those with hearing diminishments can have an easier time perceiving sound. Decreased visual perception and acuity, again, higher levels of lighting, much higher than you would because, again, as you age, your perceptions, your ability to see diminish. Non-glare surfaces on flooring, or on non-glare surfaces altogether, but especially on flooring, are very important in order to not distract sight. And the use of contrasting colors. Now, this is something people don't often think about. Utilizing colors in order to help identify door openings or anywhere you need some sort of visual pronouncement. So, black versus white, light versus dark. So placing these on the tread and rise of the stair, so if we have a hardwood tread, paint the rise white so that there is that distinct contrast. Enhancing doorways with color will help guide people with visual impairment. So contrast anywhere that attention is required. Also giving tactile cues, giving tactile information instead of having a visual cue, we can actually use our touch sense. So use texture in order to give contrast to material changes. So for instance, flooring changes from wood to low pile carpet can help designate the transition from one room to the next or announce something maybe occurring like a step. So it will allow a greater visual input. We're not changing, hold on. Slowed reaction time can result in more severe injuries from everyday issues such as stove burns, small oven fires, scalding from hot water. Any issue that you can experience currently can be amplified if you aren't quick to respond. So installation of water temperature surge protectors, there's a lot of dialogue today about making sure those are installed and used in all homes, including for children. That will help that reaction time before injury happens. Induction cooktops. Now, induction cooktops are starting to be used more and more. They look very much like a glass halogen cooktop, but they utilize a magnetic mechanism inside which creates the heat. When you touch the cooktop when nothing is on it, it actually remains cool. You do require a specialized cookware to work with it, but again, it's a small expense, and when you think about the safety of burns, and again, this does apply to children as well, it does become very helpful. And having current fire extinguishers in frequent hazard locations readily available is very important. Again, making sure that they are current and not outdated. So all the design cues we've discussed serve to support the needs of cognitive decline as well. Again, thinking about how we can make our environments work if we don't have the capacity to think quickly or process well. The more we make our spaces intuitive, the more ease we have to function and navigate as our abilities decline. So everything we've mentioned today can occur a potential financial burden. This isn't always viable for everybody. This is where pre-planning comes into play. The earlier you start planning, the more accommodation you can create as you go through your normal maintenance of your living environment. Again, small steps as you plan forward. Every time you have some sort of renovation, think about this and try to make your spaces more universal, and truthfully it does make your home more marketable if you are looking at the universal design strategies. So the first step to ideal aging in place situation is to have your home assessed by a certified professional. Well, who? Trained professionals, remodeling contractors who specialize in aging in place, architects, and of course, first and foremost, interior designers. Now, I would emphasize that this is not decorating. These are not decorators. These are people who have education and experience and certification in interior design. So look for certification, like certified interior designer. It depends on which state you're in, the requirements for interior design professionals. But look for the NCIDQ appellation. That always does designate that there is a certain level of expertise in that particular designer. So we also have some programs, CAPS, the Certified Aging in Place Specialist Certification Program. That is a collaboration between the AARP and the National Association of Home Builders. So if you can find professionals, and again, I'm sure you can go to the websites and find those certified individuals, in your area. The AIA does have a Design for Aging program, and the ASID Design for Aging Council does give training and information to designers in order to give them levels of professionalism. So, you know, look for people who really do know what they're talking about. So, you know, we've got to face it. Not all spaces are ideal for adapting to aging in place. It's important to maintain a safe, functional, and affordable living environment. You're going to have to determine the best options for you. But if we look back to our original goals and we think about it, again, the goal is to have a space that is physically manageable, emotionally uplifting, connected with independence, peace of mind, and self-improvement. So whether that means relocation or renovation, those are questions you're going to have to answer. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for listening to me blabber on for an hour. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Heidi. If anyone has additional questions, they can be emailed to ritalum@rit.edu or tweeted to @RIT_alumni with the hashtag #MeRITWebinars, and we'll direct your questions to Heidi. Note again that all our participants will receive an email from us in the next few days with a link to today's webinar recording. And we do thank Heidi for being our panelist today, and to all of our listeners for joining us for today's webinar. Please consider joining us on May 10th for How to Write a Mystery with Saunders College of Business alumna Maggie King. Maggie is the author of the Hazel Rose book Group Mysteries, and we'll discuss how to find ideas for stories in almost every area of your life. Thanks again for joining us today. Please exit the webinar by simply closing your WebEx window, and please do let us know what you thought of this webinar through a brief survey, which will pop up when you exit. Have a great day.